250 million girls and 73 million boys under the age of 18 experienced forced sexual intercourse or other forms of sexual violence during 2002. In 2004, 218 million children worldwide were involved in child labour. Up to 80% of children worldwide suffer physical punishment in their homes, with a third or more experience severe physical punishment resulting from the use of implements. Child abuse has been around for a long time, with historical records filled with reports of unkept, weak and malnourished children cast out by families to fend for themselves and of children who have been sexually abused. We spoke to a social worker about abuse.
What are the main forms of child abuse?
Well, there's child neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and domestic violence is also included now as a category of abuse in child protection.
How do you deal with the effects of child abuse?
Well, I work with foster carers and adopters, and we ask them really to parent children in a therapeutic way, so they're not just parenting as a parent of any child who hasn't had those experiences would need to be looked after. We're actually asking them to do a little bit extra and help the child to work through whatever it is that's happened to them. But things like firm routines and boundaries are very important. Routines particularly to show the child that they're safe, that they can have a predictability to their day, they know what's going to happen to them, and gradually that helps them to feel secure and build trust in the adults around them.
Have you come across a case where the child died?
I haven't personally had any experience of that happening on my caseload or in a team that I've worked for.
Do you think agencies like Childline are known well enough as a confidential service?
I think since Childline started, I think that's been really beneficial, because obviously it's had a lot of publicity, and yeah, I think children are aware of the confidentiality, and I think that has helped an awful lot of children to come forward and report abuse, maybe in situations where they wouldn't have done otherwise, because often children are threatened that if they do tell anyone, then something bad or even worse will happen to them.
For a long time there have been charitable groups and others concerned with children's well-being who have advocated the protection of children, such as the NSPCC and Childline. Nevertheless, the issue of child abuse didn't receive attention until 1962. Studies have shown that in the case of female victims of sexual abuse, over 90% of perpetrators are men, and in the case of male victims, between 63% and 86% of perpetrators are men. Whether physical, sexual, or through neglect can depend on a child's age. Fatal cases of physical abuse are found largely among young infants. One of the saddest cases of child abuse was of little Samuel Robidale. Here is his story.
Jack, Karen and baby Samuel were a happy new family whose lives were shattered when Jack's sister Michelle announced that she had had a leading, a kind of prophecy from God, telling her that Karen was too vain and needed to go on a high-fat diet of almond milk to gain weight. Michelle also said that Karen should take Samuel off the food she was feeding him and give him only her breast milk. Karen also had news, but not so extreme. She was pregnant with their second child. The days went on and Samuel was getting gradually smaller and weaker. Karen and Jack became concerned for Samuel's well-being, but they both believed that God would save him. In a diary, an entry written by Jack a week after the starvation began shows he was becoming concerned. It said, as the day grew on, Satan used the physical sight of Samuel to really get to her. He was obviously losing much weight and becoming much weaker. Because Karen was pregnant again, she wasn't producing enough breast milk to satisfy Samuel's hunger. Over the weeks, Samuel deteriorated. Karen wanted to feed him baby food, but she didn't. She kept telling herself that God would look after Samuel and help him through this, and that the sight of her son's withering body was just an act of Satan testing their will. After weeks of only being fed breast milk, Samuel began grinding his teeth, biting down on Karen's nipple, and sometimes his eyes rolled to the back of his head. He didn't cry like a normal baby. His cries sounded painful. His chest went dark and a white, chalky substance appeared in his nappy. Karen became scared and worried about Samuel, but stuck to her beliefs. 3 days before his first birthday, Samuel died. Jack, Karen and Michelle served time for child abuse.
That was one of the many stories in which the child died from the abuse. Now we go back to the interview with Joe.
There was a case a while back where social services didn't get involved because they claimed it wasn't serious enough. What do you think about that?
I think it does happen on occasions where social services departments either don't get the information that they need to act, or they do get the information and it's misinterpreted, or maybe they have inexperienced staff, which often happens because they are so usually very stretched for staffing.
What signs of abuse do you look for?
I think any changes either in behaviour, in emotional state, or in physical presentation.
Do you think there's enough being done to prevent child abuse?
I don't think there is as a society, no, because I don't think that as a society we value children or children's opinions particularly highly. And I think until we get to a point where everybody regards child protection as part of their agenda, as part of everybody's agenda, we won't stamp out child abuse, because I don't think social services departments and the other child protection agencies can actually do that on their own.
One of the most famous and extreme cases of child abuse is that of Dave Pelzer. He was born in 1960 and grew up in a middle-class suburb of San Francisco. His father was kept away from home for days at a time with work, and his mother was an alcoholic. Dave's abuse started when he was 4 years old. His mother cared for the rest of the family while Dave was starved, beaten, burnt and referred to as the boy, and then eventually it. His mother made him eat his brother's faeces and drink ammonia. School was a haven for Dave. It was a break from his mother's cruelty, and it meant that he could steal food from the cafeteria and from school lunchboxes. Teachers noticed his behaviour and notified the authorities. At the age of 12, Dave was put into care. When he became a legal adult, he dropped out of high school and began work at a factory. He passed his GED and joined the Air Force. He is now retired from the Air Force and lives with his wife and son. He has forgiven his mother. Child abuse has a devastating effect on families and victims. There are a lot of health consequences with child abuse, such as brain injuries, bruises, burns, disabilities, fractures, sexual dysfunction, STDs, drug abuse, depression, anxiety, developmental delays, poor self-esteem and infertility. Many victims keep what happened to them a secret, but more and more stories are being released. If you or someone you know are showing any signs of abuse, tell someone. It could save lives. Look at what happened to Dave Pelzer. Here are some numbers. You can also go online to and remember, family members, teachers, police and family friends can help you too.